Ooh! Hello friends, come on in. Today I'm finally having a go at a project that has been sitting in the back of my brain for a while, and that is plaster casting some randomly rocky candle holders in tin foil. It's been quite a while since I last had a go at plaster casting, and I've never actually done it at home or in the shed. I've only ever played with it in workshops. So it's about time I break into the bag of plaster that I bought ages ago and have a good old play. I feel like most of the time taken with plaster casting is in the preparing for the plaster cast stages. The plaster itself is worked quite quickly. Although I had an idea of what I was aiming for, as I'd not done this before, I wasn't too sure about how much support my tin foil moulds would need. So I built some simple cardboard boxes first that I could put my tin foil moulds into and that would help to keep them steady when the plaster went in. These boxes were really simple, stuck together with tape. I didn't worry too much about them. They didn't need to be pretty or perfect, and this is why I ended up dancing and singing to music while building them. I made two in the end, one squarish and one more rectangular. So I had saved a couple of old burned tea lights to use as part of the moulds. I grabbed a card toilet roll, cut it lengthways, and then cut a chunk off of one end. I could then coil that chunk a little bit tighter and fit it into the tea light. It's really simple, but I figured it would be an easy way of elevating the candle area and keeping it held up when I made the mould and when the plaster got poured later. Now it's time for the tin foil. This is a thicker, stronger tin foil, so while it is easily tearable, it has a bit more resilience for being moved around. I very much played this by ear. Outside of the squish it around a tea light idea, I wasn't too sure what I was doing. So I just kept crunching the foil, trying to pull it into a rough bowl shape. It ended up looking a bit like a bundt tin, you know, like you get in cake baking. Once I had gotten it more or less the right size, I popped it into the square box and used tape to affix some of the foil edges to the cardboard. I then had another go, but this time I tried to make it all a bit smaller and shallower. I ended up making a kind of teardrop shape, and because it was smaller, I figured I'd risk it holding its own shape without having a box around it. Lastly, I used two small empty glass candle jars in the same way as the tea lights for my last mould. I decided to make this a double holder and use the rectangle box to steady the mould. It's plaster time! In an effort to be safety conscious, I grabbed a mask because plaster is a dusty business. I grabbed two clean cups, one would be for plaster, one for water. I had this cool red wibbly bowl for easier pouring. Bendy bowls are great for plaster because they are so much easier to clean. It wasn't big enough to mix the plaster in though, so I had another bowl for that. And lastly, I had some rubber gloves. Apron on, and after an awkward wrangle with the mask, as a glasses wearer I simply don't enjoy masks, I was ready to go. I had no clue how much plaster I was going to need for these three moulds, so this right here is me winging it. Mixing plaster is generally a combo of 2 parts plaster to 1 part water, so I figured I'd go with 4 cups of plaster mixed with 2 cups of water and just see how much it made. I poured the water into a well in the middle of the plaster dust and then gently began swirling it all together. I love that steam that wisps up from mixing things like this. It feels really potion-y. I kept going until there seemed to be hardly any lumps, and then it was time to pour. I could have poured it straight from the big bowl, but I wanted to use my wibbly bowl, and also I felt I had a bit more control pouring from a smaller bowl. I poured some first into the square mould and then into the freestanding teardrop mould. I gave the sides of the mould a good few taps to encourage any air bubbles to surface. It was a bit harder to do that on the teardrop mould, but I tried. Then I quickly mixed up a second batch of plaster and poured a bit more into the square mould and the rest into the rectangular mould. After some final taps, it was time to clean up and leave the casts to set. 1 hour later, it was time to demould. I was pretty nervous about this because I had realised after pouring them that I probably should have sprayed the moulds with some kind of greasing agent. But heck, it was too late now. Due to all the cracks and crevices in the foil, I really wasn't sure whether I'd be able to pull the foil away without breaking the plaster. But although the foil was quite tight in some places, for the most part it did come away a lot better than I'd thought. I felt super happy with that first teardrop one, and it definitely made me feel more confident about unwrapping the other two. So here's how they looked after being unwrapped, and I've got to tell you, I was so chuffed with them. I love how cleanly the candle holes came out on the ones which used the tea light cases, and all of those chunky cracks are weirdly satisfying. At this point I left them to fully dry out. Night night, candle holders. I gave them 2 days to dry out, and this is how they looked after that time. Near enough exactly the same as when I left them, but I promise you they felt drier. At this point I felt like the teardrop one was my favourite. What do you think? Which one do you like the most? By the way, if any of this video has so far been helpful or vaguely entertaining, please do consider clicking the like button, as it really helps me out and it's free. Thank you for doing that. So I wasn't too sure how to decorate them, but I had an urge to gild, and so gild I did. Now, I probably should have sealed the plaster before decorating it. I don't know, should I have done that? If you've done this and have any advice, do share it in the comments, as I am a casting novice for sure. As it was, I just dived right in, applying some gilding glue to some of the cracks and in the candle hole, waiting for it to go tacky, and then sticking on the gold flakes. I decided to be quite subtle with it on this first one, just aiming for little glints peeping out from the cracks. Gilding, when I do it at least, is a messy business, but I do love it. Look at that shine! With the second one, I figured I'd try using a more obvious gilding area, so I put glue quite haphazardly into the hole and surrounding walls. I then shoved quite a few flakes in there and essentially created a jolly gold hole, which sounds weird, but that is what it is. I ummed and ahed about whether to add anything more, but in the end I decided the simplicity of it was pretty nice. Lastly, with the double holder, I decided to try gold acrylic paint, and as well as painting the candle recesses, I also roughly brushed over some of the textures and then started adding some simple pattern. is it me, or does this end up looking a bit like a duvet with 2 dents in it? Once that thought entered my head, that was all I could see, and it is still what I think of every time I look at it. It's not a bad thing, it just is what it is. So this is what they look like with the candles in them. And while I started off by loving the teardrop one the most, I think now I like this squarish, squishy looking one more. I really like how the gold creeps out from the candle and it just looks like a big old cosy rock. Who doesn't want a cosy rock? I will say, I am entirely unsure what I am supposed to seal these with in terms of making them heat-proof. If anyone has suggestions, please do let me know. Rest assured, I won't be using them as proper candle holders until I have done something to make sure they're safe. I did light a candle quickly in each just to film them so you can see how they'd look, but I blew them out straight after I got the shots. So them's are my candle holders. I really enjoyed making them. Let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching. It's lovely having you here. This cosy community is slowly growing and I am so looking forward to creating more joyful things with you in the new year and beyond. Keep making happy and I'll see you next time.